Alright, so remember last lecture we talked about Kant's formula of universal law. And he's the one to define duty in this way, and I said, well, it's not so clear why Kant excludes other candidates, and it's also not clear what makes the fact that we couldn't will that everybody do something so special, right? Well, I think the formula of humanity will help us to answer some of these questions. Alright, before we can understand what the formula of humanity is, though, I think we need to take a couple steps back. We need to ask ourselves, what is it that makes human beings special? If we think we're special, why is that? What can we do that other things can't? Kant says what makes human beings special is that we are rational, and also that we are free. We have free will. Now, what's surprising is that Kant will say that these two things amount to the same thing. Well, why does Kant say this? Because this might strike us as a little weird. Aren't rationality and freedom different things? Well, think of this. Let me just tell you a story, and I think this will make this clear. Years ago, we used to have a cat named Mr. Whiskers. And Mr. Whiskers was not a good cat. He was just a not very friendly cat who liked to scratch the furniture. Mr. Whiskers was at best a C+ cat, right? So, like I said, one of the things Mr. Whiskers loved to do was to scratch the furniture. He would mess up the couch. Just loved to shred the couch. So we decide that we're going to train Mr. Whiskers, right? We're going to use negative conditioning. So every time Mr. Whiskers scratches the couch, we have a squirt bottle next to the couch. We're going to squirt Mr. Whiskers. Mr. Whiskers does not like getting squirted from a squirt bottle. Most cats don't. He's no exception. But what happened was this. Mr. Whiskers, you could just see him on the floor, and you could see, like, he wanted to scratch the couch, and you could see, like, just the pressure building and building and building. He'd get closer to the couch, pressure building, building, and finally he'd just start frantically scratching the couch. Squirt bottle would come out. He would run. Usually we'd zap him at least once or twice. It almost became like a terrible game, right? Now, why do I tell this story? Well, look, what is going on in Mr. Whiskers' head? Probably. Look, I've never been a cat. I've never had a conversation with one where they answered back, so I don't know for sure. But unless Mr. Whiskers' little kitty, mental machinery is a lot more complex than I think it is, I think it's something like this. Mr. Whiskers has this strong desire to scratch the couch. He also has a strong desire not to get zapped with the squirt bottle. And what I think's happening in his little kitty head is that these two desires are basically pushing against each other, just back and forth until finally scratch the couch wins. Now, but look, think about yourself when you're tempted to do something you think you probably shouldn't. I'll give you an example. For me, if we have ice cream in the house, I have a bad habit of eating it for breakfast, right? That is not something I should do, eat ice cream for breakfast. And when I do this, or when I'm tempted to do this, it's not just that I'm like, desire for ice cream, desire not to eat ice cream, wore it out in my head, right? I can actually step back and ask myself, do I really want to do this? Is the fact that right now I want ice cream a good reason for me to eat ice cream for breakfast? I can think about long-term consequences. I can also think about, what does this mean? Do I want to be the kind of person who has so little self-control that he eats ice cream for breakfast? Unfortunately, apparently sometimes I do, but, my point is, Mr. Whiskers can't do that, right? He can't think, I want to scratch the couch, but is that a good reason to scratch the couch? He can't think, do I want to be the kind of kitty who scratches the couch whenever he feels like scratching the couch? No. For me, I can look at my desires and I can ask, are they good reasons to act? All things considered. Mr. Whiskers cannot do that. We human beings act for reasons, and we are not, unlike Mr. Whiskers, we are not just pulled and pushed around by our desires. Unlike every other animal we're familiar with, right? Dogs aren't really any different as far as I can tell. We can also evaluate our desires, right? We can look at all our different desires and ask, well, which one gives us the best reason to act? We can also look at desires, things we want to do, and ask if they give us any reason to do anything at all. We can choose, we can look at our reasons, and we can decide which ones give us reasons to act at all and which ones give us reasons to act, all things considered, right? And for Kant, that's what it is to make a choice. To look at your desires, to look at the other things you want, to look at the reasons you think you have, and decide which ones are good ones at all, and then once you do that, which ones on balance actually give you a reason to act and how you should weigh those desires, right? Those things you want to do. Acting for reasons, evaluating reasons, picking out which reasons are good ones for us to act and not good reasons for us to act are for Kant what it is to make a choice. And Kant will say, look, each of us thinks that our ability to make choices for ourselves, our ability to reason, to decide what are and aren't good reasons for us, deserves respect. We each think of ourselves as deserving respect because of this ability. Kant will say, though, every mature, cognitively normal human being has this same ability. Not only do they have this same ability, they think of themselves in exactly the same way. I have this ability, and because I have this ability, my reasons and choices deserve respect. Well, all this brings us to Kant's formula of humanity. And the formula of humanity says, always treat humanity as an end in itself and never as a mere means. And I put mere in bold here because this one word is hugely important to what this means. So what is it to treat someone as a mere means? Again, the mere here is very important. Because treating someone as a mere means is not the same as treating someone as a means. We treat people as means all the time, and we don't think it's wrong, right? Usually. You use me as a means to understand Kant and all these other people we're reading. I use you, at least indirectly. You're paying tuition or someone's paying tuition for you. I use you as a way to get a paycheck. I mean, I like teaching, but there's at least part of that. I wouldn't be doing this if I wasn't getting paid. Oh my goodness, isn't all that horrible, right? We use the mailman to deliver our letters. We use the person at the coffee shop to get our coffee, so on and so forth. Well, look, most of us don't think there's any problem whatsoever with that, about using people as means in this way. Using someone as a mere means is something very different. And for Kant, using someone as a mere means that you treat them in a way that fails to respect their ability to act for reasons. Let me give you guys an example, and this is outlandish, but whatever. When I teach a class, no one is using me as a mere means because I've agreed to do it. I sign a contract with the school and they say you teach this many classes under these conditions and we give you this much money, and I say, okay, you giving me this much money and other benefits is a good reason for me to do this. I decide this is a good reason. I will teach these classes. When you take the classes, you decide whatever you get out of the class, learning, career advancement, all the above is a good reason to pay $500 or whatever, or have someone pay it for you, right? You've made a choice this class, for whatever reason, is worth this much to you. I am not using you as a mere means. You are not using me as a mere means. We've been offered a choice. We have decided these are good reasons for us. But, imagine someone held a gun on me and said, well, you have to teach this class or I'll shoot you. In that case, I wouldn't have a choice, right? I don't get to decide if whatever they're offering me is a good reason to teach the class or not. They just make me do it. They are using me as a mere means because they don't respect my ability to choose. And what's funny here, they would be using me as a mere means even if for some weird reason after I finish, they pay me, right? Because they don't give me a choice. They don't respect my ability to decide what are and aren't good reasons for me. Let's go back to Kant's actual examples. Consider lying to a friend to get money. Well, this doesn't respect their ability to decide what are and aren't good reasons for them to make choices, because look, the real reason you want them to act, the real thing you're proposing is, hey, how about you give me money because it'll help me out. You, by lying to them, try to take the choice away from them on whether that is a good reason for them or not. You give them a fake reason that is not your real reason and try to trick them into doing what you want. You're trying to manipulate them. You are treating them as a thing that can be handled so as to serve your purposes if you lie to your friend to get money. That uses them as a mere means. You do not respect their ability to reason, to decide what are and aren't good reasons for them. The same goes for pretty much any case where you lie to somebody or deceive them to try to get them to do what you want, or you manipulate someone. Or consider force or coercion. In some sense you have a choice, I suppose, but if someone holds a gun on you and says, give me your wallet or, I'm going to kill you, that's not a real choice. You don't have any choice to say no, right? Murder, right? If you kill somebody, not only are you not respecting their choice because they don't want to be killed, you destroy their entire ability to make future choices, their ability to reason, their ability to act freely for all time. Obviously, that does not respect it. Now, look, I think the formula of humanity so far does a good job. We can see why this is important, We think human beings are special. We think we deserve a certain kind of respect. Well, other human beings think the same thing. They are just like us in the abilities that we think make us special. If we deserve respect, they do too. So we can see why it's important in a way that I don't think we can see why the formula of universal law is important. But why should we define duty in this way? Well, I think one key thing here is to think about the formula of humanity and freedom. Remember, we had this question of why Kant rejects the other accounts of what duty are. I think the formula of humanity gives us an account of that when we think about the way Kant thinks it relates to this idea of freedom and what human freedom is. Imagine that you do something. Someone says, well, God wants you to do X, or your society says do X. And you're like, okay, I'll just do it. You don't ask any more questions, go any further. Kant would say, if you just accept this reason, if you say, well, God tells me to do it, society tells me to do it, or whatever, you are not really taking account of your own freedom. You have a responsibility to decide whether this is a good reason for you or not. That's what it is to act freely. That's what it is to act responsibly. You have the ability to choose what are and aren't good reasons for you, and if you just take some command without thinking about it, without evaluating whether it gives you a good reason, Kant would say you are not acting freely. If, on the other hand, you think about whether you have good reasons, whether it respects other human beings or not, you know, does it in any way violate the freedom of others? Kant would say, well, now you're basing your duty on your own and your others' ability to act freely. That is, to act with what he calls autonomy. That respects human freedom in a way that simply accepting some reason, like God says do it, society says to do it, does not. So, you know, when you make the formula of humanity central to your reasoning, you act with respect for your own freedom and freedom for the others in a way that you don't when you just take some other given claim as your duty of what you're supposed to do. Now look, just to be clear, the fact that your society, the law, your job says to do something might give you a reason to do it, right? My job says teach these classes. Well, I think, well, I've agreed to do this. You know, these other people have given me something. I've agreed to give them something in return. You know, I've agreed to do this job. That gives me reasons. This fact that I've agreed with other people not to do it would be using them as a mere means, right? If you cheat on your taxes, you're not doing your part in upholding society. You are, in a very real sense, using others as a mere means. Kant would say that gives you a reason not to do it. But the fact that the law, your society, your job, whatever says do it can't be the whole story. You have to think about respect for humanity, respect for the human ability to act freely and make choices. If you don't take that stuff that the formula of humanity talks about into account, you do not act with what Kant calls autonomy. You don't respect, in a very real sense, your own ability to be free and to make choices. And that, I think, gives us a good reason for why Kant thinks this formula of humanity defines what duty is. All right, but now you might be wondering, okay, so we're starting to see why this is so important for Kant, but we have this formula universal law, we also have this formula humanity, we have two different forms of the categorical imperative. Well, why does he give us two? And, you know, which one's more important? You professors seem to be thinking that the formula humanity's doing more work, is better. Couldn't we just use it and throw out the formula of universal law? Why do we need it? And if we do need it, well, now we have two tests. How are we supposed to make these two square up? I'll talk more about that in the next lecture.